Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee of the AIT 50th Governing Council Committee for giving us this opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing here at the University of the Philippines Visayas, in particular in relation to mechanization of selected aspects of aquaculture, wherein we try to find a balance for sustainable production. So before going into what we've actually been doing, I would just like to discuss a few points related to agriculture 4.0, or what we would say agriculture during the fourth industrial revolution. Now, agriculture in the fourth industrial revolution in general is about breakthroughs in emerging technologies in fields such as robotics, AI, nanotech, quantum technology, or quantum computing, biotech, the Internet of Things, decentralized consensus, fifth generation wireless technologies or 5Gs, 3D printing, and autonomous vehicles, just to name a few. Now, when we talk about agriculture in relation to the fourth industrial revolution, this refers to combined internal and external interactions of farming operations, offering digital information at all farm sectors and processes. Another term that we would usually want to use for agriculture 4.0 would be precision farming. And in the pictures here, you see the use of biotech, drones, and even robotics in a lot of operations in some aspects of agriculture nowadays. Now, when we talk about agriculture and digital farming figures, what's very interesting to point out is because of the Internet of Things, it has the potential to increase yields of agriculture productivity by as much as 70% projected by 2050. It's also been shown that nowadays around 70 to 80% of new farm equipment is used or has a component for precision agriculture. This could be in the form of a global positioning system or even just sensors that allow us to gather as much data as possible from harvest, sowing, and all other aspects of agriculture. Another aspect is that in the near future, or there will be around 27 billion devices by 2024. That's not too far along. That's around 3 years from now. And out of that 27 billion devices, around 225 million will be used for agriculture. Now, the importance in all of these particular innovations comes in the form of being able to, one aspect is being able to reduce crop losses. So it's been shown that 90% of all crop losses are because of weather. And this crop damage could actually be reduced by as much as 25% by using predictive weather modeling and precision agriculture techniques. Now, with all the background on precision agriculture, we here at the University of the Philippines Visayas want kind of thought now. It paints a very good picture for agriculture, but for the Philippines, where are we in all of this? And in actuality, despite all the developments in agriculture in terms of using GPS and a lot of sensors and robotics to assist in agricultural processes, the truth on the ground here in the Philippines is that a lot of our agricultural processes are still very backward. So this is one of the more common machines that you would see in a lot of farmlands here in the Philippines. It's a hand tractor. And at this point in time, development in agriculture in the Philippines is still very far from what we dream of being part of the fourth industrial revolution. These are just figures. These are probably already dated figures showing the level of farm mechanization back in 1990. And as you can see, the more developed countries like Japan, Korea, and China have invested a significant amount of horsepower per hectare when it comes to agriculture. And when it comes to the Philippines, we've been lagging behind at less than 1 horsepower per hectare. Now, in more recent data, despite considerable progress, for example, for the Philippines, it could still be shown that we lag significantly behind a lot of our neighbors when it comes to the use of mechanization and horsepower per hectare. Previously in 1990, it was less than one. Here it's a little bit just over 1 horsepower per hectare. And this reflects in, for example, the price of rice that we have here in the Philippines. In the Philippines, the price of rice or the production cost of rice is at around 11 pesos per kilogram. Thailand has significantly reduced this to around 8.4 pesos per kilogram because of the significant amount of mechanization that they've also been implementing in rice agriculture. Vietnam, on the other hand, is a very good example, although we weren't able to get data in terms of the level of mechanization for Vietnam. The production cost for rice is at around 5.6 pesos per kilogram. So it just shows the significant contribution of being able to mechanize aspects of agriculture in bringing down production costs. Now, the Philippines is not or has not really, what do you call this, lacked in terms of effort in trying to implement mechanization of aspects in agriculture and even fisheries. This is evident in some of the laws that have been passed, like Republic Act number 10601 or the Agriculture and Fisheries Mechanization laws. Despite this, there is still an evident lack of implementation of mechanization at the farm level. That's where, for example, other government agencies like the Department of Science and Technology have been trying to implement research projects such as the smarter approaches to reinvigorate agriculture as an industry, or SARAI. They've actually been trying to implement what do you call this? More advanced technologies in rice agriculture, actually by the use of drones and other aspects for mechanization to improve really rice production. Now, despite all this, we have to admit to ourselves that in all comparing the progress of the Philippines to our neighbors, technically the Philippines is still playing catch up. So we ask ourselves, why should we mechanize? Well, first and foremost, it has really been proven that mechanization has been positively correlated with farm productivity. This is evident in the productivity of the farms in our neighboring countries here in Southeast Asia. Now, one other aspect why, for example, some farmers are hesitant to go for mechanization is that the reasoning is that mechanization is capital intensive. But if we look at the progress of technology, be it in agriculture, biotech, for instance, even in genomics, you've seen that because of the progress of development of technology, it has also driven down the cost of machinery prices since the 1970s all the way up to the present. And it has also been shown here in the Philippines that the cost of labor is actually one of the biggest contributors to the high cost of production, and not necessarily any attempts for mechanization. Another, what do you call this? Another factor that is what they call this keeps our farmers from what they call this trying to implement mechanization here in the Philippines is that they've been saying that mechanization could be a culprit to increased environmental degradation. And one answer for this is a concept known as conservation agriculture, wherein it's an approach to managing agroecosystems for improved and sustained productivity, increased profits, and food security, while at the same time preserving and enhancing the resource base of the environment. And a lot of countries have been implementing mechanizations or machines that are geared towards what we call conservation agriculture. So these are just a few examples of these. Now, another factor why a lot of people are still hesitant to really mechanize at the farm level is that they use the argument that mechanization will take away jobs from our farmers. But then again, we have to look at the numbers that we have here in the Philippines. For instance, in terms of farm employment over the past several years, we've seen a gradual decline in the number of farmers per million people here in the Philippines. When in fact, because of this decline, the average age of farmers here in the Philippines is 57. So the farming sector here in the Philippines is a really aging population. And we also see that it's compounded actually by the increasing amount of wages or peso, the amount of wage that is necessary for farmers per day. It means that it adds cost. The amount of labor adds cost to the production as well. So with this in mind, we've clearly, what they call this, established why mechanization is really important for us to really increase productivity here in the Philippines. So why should we mechanize? First, it improves productivity for food security and safety. Next is technically we are able to implement sustainable systems here in agriculture, and it allows us to minimize the environmental impact of this human activity. Furthermore, it also allows us to adapt to socio-economic changes in terms of the demographics of the farming sector nowadays. Now, with this in mind, I would like to discuss some aspects of mechanization when it comes to aquaculture. Now, a good example or a good model for aquaculture mechanization is Norway. So I'm pretty sure a lot of you throughout Southeast Asia and through our neighbors in Asia would go to supermarkets today and you would easily see, or it's easy to purchase, for example, salmon coming from Norway. And one of the reasons why they were able to come up or with such large productions of salmon for them to be able to export this is because of the implementation of advanced technologies in terms of cage aquaculture and also in terms of being able to mechanize the feeding aspects for salmon aquaculture. So it's the progress of Norway is very evident in terms of the increase in the production of salmon aquaculture output over the past decades, as well as being the major being a major exporter of farmed salmon all throughout. They have a stake of more than 50% actually in total global aquaculture production of salmon. Now, when it comes to the production of aquaculture in the Philippines, we've also seen a steady increase because actually a lot of the seafood that is being consumed in the Philippines nowadays are being sourced from aquaculture, and there's a shift from capture fisheries going into aquaculture. So we see the opportunity in aquaculture here in the Philippines. But despite the opportunity that aquaculture proposes, it has also spawned several problems. In the case of cage aquaculture, for instance, it has been identified as one of the culprits for increased marine pollution along coastlines. This is mainly because of the high stocking densities, but more importantly, it's because of the feed that is wasted when you use manual feeding. Studies have shown that around up to 60 to 70% of feed is actually wasted when you use sinking pellets and manual feeding. Another problem of, for example, intensive cage aquaculture here in the Philippines is that when we use manual feeding, it results in very high feed conversion ratios, which also results in a very wide distribution of fish sizes at harvest. This would give you a variation of prices for your harvest, and sometimes most of your harvest would be dominated by the smaller fish, meaning that you get less value for the amount of feed that you put into at the end of your culture period. But these the challenges have also provided us with opportunities to implement new technologies. So based on the number of cage aquaculture systems we have here in the Philippines, we've seen that it comprises around 27% of the total volume of aquaculture here in the Philippines, and it's still actually growing. So because of this, it provides us with a good opportunity to come up with new technologies to support the growth of this particular sector further. So with that in mind, here at the University of the Philippines, we've tried to come up with technologies to support this particular expansion. One of the things that we've been working on is the remotely operated automatic bottom feeder. So it's one of our innovations to try to address issues on feeding efficiency, labor needs, and both the environmental impact of cage aquaculture. So we initially developed this particular technology through the Department of Science and Technology funding through a project called Enhancement of Milkfish Culture Operations through Mechanization. So if we look at some of the common fish that we culture here in the Philippines, such as milkfish and tilapia, when we look at the mouth structure of these particular fish, these are actually mid-water feeding fish, meaning they feed at the middle of the water. So we realized that in order to really maximize this particular aspect of the culture species, we have to adapt the way we feed these fish. That's why what we wanted to do is come up with a bottom feeding mechanism using floating pellets. So first, it's suited to the feeding habits of the cultured fish, namely milkfish and tilapia. It also maximizes the water column as a feeding area as compared to just feeding it at the surface. Finally, it also allows it allows fish even access to feeds, resulting in more uniform sizes. And so far, the data that we've been getting from the use of our automatic bottom feeder has been good. We've been able to drive down the feed conversion ratio from 2.5 to around 1.8, which is considerable improvement in the efficiency of how fish are able to utilize the feeds. At the same time, in terms of size distribution, when we compare it to our manual feeding experiments, we used to get very small fish sizes previously, but with the implementation of what do you call this, our automatic bottom feeder, we were able to eliminate the extra small size fishes and get a considerable larger amount of medium to large and even jumbo fish at harvest. Aside from that, we wanted the technology to be environmentally conscious as well. Aside from being efficient and reducing the feed that is being wasted, we tried to design it in such a way that it could be solar powered. This allows us to deploy this particular technology offshore, allowing us to really use this even in deep water cages. So just to wrap up my talk, I would just like to summarize it in these 3 points. First and foremost is that increased productivity coupled with sustainable practices can be achieved through the development and, more importantly, the use of new technologies. Now, despite the resistance to adopting new technologies, data has clearly shown that it is feasible from a scientific perspective. But in my opinion, somehow it's more important that it also shows that it's somehow a necessity from a socio-economic standpoint. And finally, Philippine aquaculture can further expand and support targets for both food security and economic development through the appropriate adoption of emerging technologies. With that, I would like to end my talk, and I would like to thank again the organizers for giving us this opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing. Thank you and good morning.